need to stop. Okay, so we got plenty of time, and I also thought that we'll have plenty of time if you have any questions, not just about our ministry, but about anything relating to Jewish ministry. I thought we could have some Q&A, and if you ask too tough of a question, I just give it back to Pastor Scott anyway, so he can answer the tough ones, okay? Because there's always somebody that's going to ask me about the red heifer or the Antichrist, and I'll just send that your way, okay? So my name is Mitch Foreman, and I'm the Vice President of U.S. Ministries. And in the U.S., we have 90 missionaries and 75 volunteers with another 40 admin people. So we have about 150, 200 people that kind of come into my realm at Chosen People Ministry, and I love it because I'm a pretty good organizer and I'm very good at delegating and overseeing. So the Lord has prepared me for the position that I'm in, and I love that. But I wanted to kind of give you an overview of, this is our founder, Rabbi Leopold Cohn, who came to New York in 1892. And in 1892, he was walking in Romania, where he was from, and he saw a page of the New Testament that had been ripped out of a New Testament book on the sidewalk. And he read it, and I think it had something to do about Jesus. And growing up in a very, very Jewish home, and him practicing and studying to be a rabbi, he had never read the New Testament, and he got very curious about it. And he got very curious about the idea of the Jewish Messiah, because since Jesus came, the Jewish people, do you know that the average Jewish person doesn't study Messianic prophecy? I had no idea about Messianic prophecy. So if you were a Christian and said, Jesus fulfilled all the prophecies, I would say, I would have no idea what prophecies you're looking at. We don't study it, because if you studied Messianic prophecy, you know who you might eventually find. So for the most part, if you're talking to somebody who's Jewish, all Messianic prophecy comes down to one. Jesus is not the Messiah, because when the Messiah comes, there'll be peace. And when Jewish people look out into the world, do they see a lot of peace? No. So that's basically what we learned. But he got very curious, and they told Rabbi Cohn, well, to really know about the Messiah, you have to go to New York and go study with the rabbis over there. So he did. And what he didn't realize is that the Lord had a hand upon his life even before he knew it. He stayed with a friend of his who was a baker. And he went to the local synagogue a few Saturday mornings. And then on the third Saturday that he was in New York City, in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, instead of taking a left to go to the synagogue, for some reason he took a right, and he saw a big sign in Yiddish, Jews who believe in Jesus. And it outraged him. And so he demanded to speak to the rabbi as he was preaching like me. And some of the guys in the back kind of calmed him down and said, just chill a little bit and just sit and listen, and then he'll be happy to talk to you the next day. So Rabbi Cohn went to go visit this young Jewish Messianic rabbi, and he just happened to got a new shipment of Yiddish New Testaments that were printed in the UK. And he gave it to Rabbi Cohn, and you know what? He found his Messiah. And then he got some education. They sent him back to Scotland, get some education. He came back and started the mission of, it's called the Brownsville Mission to the Jews in Brooklyn, New York, and started witnessing to Jewish people. And this is the third building that became the headquarters for about 50 years. So isn't that cool? They didn't even have cars back then. Those are carriages and then horse and buggy. So Rabbi Cohn is our founder. And then I stand on his shoulders, and this is my family, my wife, Keena, my two girls, my son, and my dog, Coco. So I've made it. I got one of each. And I couldn't do my ministry. My oldest daughter is going to graduate from Gordon College with a degree in biology and chemistry, and she wants to be a PA. So that's good. My younger daughter came to me at 18 and goes, "Dad, I'm 18 years old. How do I know what I want to do for the rest of my life?" I said, "Well, you got to figure it out pretty soon because I'm kicking you out in 4 years, so figure it out." And then you know what I did? I redid my attic, realizing kids don't leave anymore, right? So Alana will figure it out. And then my son Josh is, this is a little bit younger, but he's 13. I'm going to show you a picture next. But my wife, Keena, you want to hear a reality TV show? So my wife and I are members of First Baptist Church of Haverhill, Mass. And our charter was signed before the Revolutionary War by John Hancock. And we've planted a lot of churches, and I know that our footprint could be in any Baptist church in New England because we were one of the first Baptist churches in New England. So my wife is the assistant, administrative assistant to the pastor. And the pastor's wife is my assistant at Chosen People Ministries. So we do a wife swap in the daytime. And you know what? It works. Because my assistant, her name is Jess, and I go, "Would you want to work for your husband?" And you know what she told me? No. And vice versa, because if I told my wife what to do, she probably wouldn't do it, you know. Jess, she has to do it because I pay her, so, you know, it works pretty good. But I love my wife. We've been married 27 years, and I couldn't do what I do unless I had her support. And we love to do ministry together, and I love to be on the streets. So I mentioned last night, my son Josh, 13 years old, first time on the streets. He came with me to Boston University. Isn't that cool? And I don't know if you can see what the sign says, but he wrote, "Are you good enough to get into heaven?" Just asking somebody something simple like that is pretty cool, isn't it? Because, it's just most people aren't used to the spiritual questions. And it's interesting because, BU has a seminary. You can see the main chapel in the background. It's actually where Methodists go to get ordained. But I'm not sure they even plant any Methodist pastors. I think they all just stay in academia, to be honest with you. So that's a great place to go. So that's in Boston University, okay? And that's our mission statement. We exist to pray for, evangelize, disciple, and serve Jewish people everywhere, and to help fellow believers to do the same. So our mission is to go to bring the gospel to Jewish people and to serve them, and to help the church and other Christians do the same, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. We just had a meeting, and I think we're going to add a 5th article on the top. We want to defend the Jewish people too. We feel that we need to, when anti-Semitism raises its head, that we don't want to just share the gospel. We want to share it by standing with Jewish people as well as people try to attack the Jewish people in Israel. And that's going to be very much part of who we are as a ministry, because we're Jews. Whether the Jewish community accepts Messianic Jews like myself as being Jewish, we accept ourselves as being Jews and feel very much that when anti-Semitism, becomes more of a problem, we actually can help in ways that the Jewish community can't. And you know how we can do that? We have bridges to Christians and churches that can help and stand with Jewish people that they couldn't normally do. So, Pastor Scott, that's one of the reasons why I want to come here too. I want this church to be a light not just to the community, but if there was something that happened in Bangor, like somebody put a swastika somewhere, a lot of times you don't realize the Jewish community feels they're all alone. you know? So imagine if Pastor Scott just picked up the phone and called the rabbi and say, we want to let you know we're not going to stand for that in our community, and if you need any help, we're here to help you. Just a phone call, an email, something like that goes a long way, because a lot of times Jewish people, when things like that happen, they think that nobody wants to stand with them. So I always ask churches and Christians, if you have a Jewish person, if something happens, it's okay to say, I'm praying for you. What can I do to help? Because what you don't know, and this is, again, I'm giving you some insights into the Jewish people. Growing up, we were told that the church didn't do anything during the Holocaust. Where was the church standing up with the Jewish people during the Holocaust? And it's still kind of in the background of a lot of older Jewish people. Where was the church when 6 million Jewish people, died in the Holocaust? And it's something that I don't think the Jewish people blame the church for what happened. I think they blame the church for not standing up. Because my dad often comes to me. My dad's 90 years old, not a believer, and will say, Mitch, why do Christians who love Jesus, who's Jewish, hate Jewish people? That's his perception, and it's his perception that a lot of Jewish people. So I always ask the church, we need to change that. And if the church could be very bold during this time of another round of where anti-Semitism is going to keep getting worse and worse, it makes a huge difference. This is just a chart showing you for the first time in modern history, Israel has more Jews than the United States. For the most part, there's 15 million, 16 million Jewish people in the world, and it's 1/3 Israel, 1/3 the United States, and 1/3 in the rest of the world. And Israel, for the first time in modern history, is now overtaken the United States with the amount of Jews. But my mission is very important here in the U.S. because 1/3 of all Jewish people still live here in the United States. And we have branches all over the world. And, did that not? There we go. So we're in 21 countries. Now, not all of those 21 countries have Jewish people. So Argentina does, Australia, Brazil, Canada has a few 100,000. Finland has very few Jewish people. But you know why there's a branch in Finland? They send out missionaries. They support work, and they have been for over 100 years. Finland supports a lot of ministry in Israel. So there is some, like Taiwan. Not that many Jewish people in Taiwan, but guess what? They send out Chinese missionaries, and they have somebody in Israel that they support. So we open up branches, not just where Jewish people are, but countries that want to stand with us. And this is kind of what our global map looks like. It's pretty, from one little menorah in Brooklyn to 129 years later, we're all over the world. For the most part, wherever there's a major Jewish community, we have work there. And that's kind of what our global work looks like. This is kind of now the U.S. You can see who reigns dominant with the Jewish people. It's where we are. Okay, the Northeast has roughly 2/3 of all the Jewish people in the United States. New England, with Maine, Connecticut, Boston has now. This is has even grown. I put another 50,000 people in there that don't get counted in the census sometimes because there's 250, 300,000 students in the Boston area, and probably 10 to 20% of them are Jewish. It's a lot of Jewish students. That's why I want to be on the campuses. Okay? So that's pretty good. Midwest. Actually, you know what the fastest growing, there's 2 cities that are growing fast that we're going to start to work in. Las Vegas, 100,000 Jewish people. In Atlanta, Atlanta is growing because a lot of people are moving from the Northeast. They don't want to quite go to Florida yet, okay? Even though in the Jewish community, do you know it's a law that if you're Jewish and you live in Boston, you have to move to Florida when you're 65 years old? And that's kind of all of our cities where we have a major work in, and it's keeps growing. And that's kind of where the map is, and that shouldn't surprise anybody that predominantly the Jewish people live on the coast. Okay? And Chicago and Minneapolis in the middle of the country, but for the most part, most Jewish people, Northeast, Florida, California, that's predominantly where the Jewish people live. Okay? And we have volunteers. So there are people, there might be somebody here that says, Mitch, how can I help chosen people? I don't want to be a full-time missionary, but I have some time. How can I help you up here in Bangor? And I would say you could help me in a lot of ways, because I'm probably not going to deploy somebody to Bangor because there's too many Jewish people that I want to reach in Boston. But there are Jewish people here in this part of Maine. So we have developed a whole volunteer involvement program where I call these volunteers the eyes and ears of Chosen People Ministries. So they might go to a church and they might meet other Christians and pastors and have me say, they help me get into other churches so I can have a relationship with them. There might be a missions conference somewhere that they might represent chosen people. So not to take them away from the church, but they're there to help be the eyes and ears. So if there's somebody here that feels that maybe God might, you have some time, and somebody will ask me, well, how much time do I need to give? And I'll say, I don't know, how much time can you give me? Because if you give me 1 hour a month, it's better than 0. So I cater a program individually depending on where you are in life and what community you're in. And so the Lord has really blessed us. And look at that. My goal is to actually have a volunteer in every state of the country. And we had one 10 years ago. So that's my goal. And my goal with the volunteers, especially now, especially with the rise of anti-Semitism, my goal, and we're going to have a big conference with all the volunteers online, I want them to start We Stand with Israel prayer group once a month in the state that they're in. So by minimum, you can come together once a month as a volunteer and maybe some of the people that love Israel in the community and pray for the needs of Israel, the Jewish people, and Chosen People Ministries. So you can pray for that because that's been on my heart for a long time. Okay. And the face of Judaism has changed quite a bit. I was talking to Pastor Scott, and it went from being like Fiddler on the Roof type of Jew to Jerry Seinfeld. Did you know that George is Jewish in Seinfeld? He represents, Jerry Seinfeld, both of his parents are Jewish and live in Florida, okay? So he's Jewish. George is Jewish, and he actually represents the Jewish community today because in George's life on the TV show, his father's Jewish, his mother's not. He's half Jewish. So he lives in both worlds, and that's predominantly the Jewish community changing into today. So it's changing. And then a lot of Jewish people were into New Age and Kabbalah. So we, a few hundred years ago, invented our own New Age kind of community to keep it within Judaism, but it's pretty mystic, and a lot of Jewish people get involved in this. It's called Kabbalah. And really, a lot of people ask me, why do Jewish people vote Democrat? I think it might be one of the most asked questions I get. So if you're going to ask that question, I'm going to answer it for you right now, okay? Because growing up in the Jewish world, especially after the Holocaust, we were the oppressed. And after the Holocaust, the Jewish community made a decision that we're going to help other communities not be oppressed. So the Jewish community has always, probably in the last 50, 60, 70 years, wanted to stand with those. Like, for example, the Jewish community was very much involved in the in women's being able to vote. The Jewish community actually established the first union in the United States. A lot of Jewish immigrants worked in, we call the shmata business. Shmata are clothes. They sold clothes, and we actually, as a ministry, our ministry, we trained Jewish immigrants to use a sewing machine as we were preaching the gospel to them. But they got jobs, and there was a big fire in New York City in one of these factories. And the Jewish community got together after the fire and realized we got to be able to stand with the workers. So we've always been involved more in the social awareness category, which for most Jewish people, why? I don't know. It's, again, perception. Which political group does that better? Right? Is it the Democrats, the Republicans? For the most part, I think the Jewish people feel the Democrats have done a better job in that area. Okay? I might disagree with that, but that's the perception in the Jewish world. So the average secular Jew is probably going to vote Democrat. And I know you're sitting there going, but they don't really stand with Israel, and they might stand with other people, but now they're even standing against Israel. I know, it's weird. You know which one group that evangelicals share almost the exact political views with? Orthodox Jews. Because Orthodox Jews tend to be a 2 or 3 issue voting bloc. They very much will defend marriage between a man and a woman, the biblical view. They are vehemently against abortion, and they're very conservative economically. So you'd be surprised that if you ever meet an Orthodox Jew, talk politics. You have a lot to agree on. Isn't that interesting? Who would have thought that both of you would vote for Trump, right? Now, I take that back because I can't say who to vote for when I'm up here, okay? They'll put me in jail for that. No, I'm not the pastor. The pastor can't do that. I'm not saying that. I'm just giving you a viewpoint. Isn't that interesting that evangelical Christians and Orthodox Jews, because of the two groups really understanding the scriptures more than obviously any other community, that you share a lot in common. And this is kind of everything we do. We do evangelism, discipleship, plant congregations, plant messianic centers. We do short-term missions, summer internships, camps. We do tours to Israel, publications, full-time ministry. I keep pretty busy. We do a lot of short-term opportunities. One of the things that we just started, which is fantastic, was we got a grant to rent an apartment in the lower part of New York near New York University, and we take people in between their bachelor's and master's for a year. We pay them, pay for everything that they do, and then they spend a year doing evangelism on the campus of New York University. So that's a pretty good program that we just started. In fact, we got enough money to run the program 3 years. This year, the foundation didn't give us the grant money anymore, but it was so successful that we just raised money and we do that ourselves now. Because it was so successful, we don't want to give up the apartment. So that's a pretty good program, and it's really, really been very helpful. We do an outreach called Shalom New York every summer. We used to do 2 weeks, and now we do a week, and we do a week in other cities. And we bring in usually between 100 to 125 people. This is really for the untrained. We want you, if you want to do ministry, come and do Jewish ministry first. You know why? First, Paul said it to the Jew first. Second, I can teach you how to witness to Jewish people, you can witness to anybody. Right? If you can I'm going to teach you a Yiddish word. You ready? I already taught you one. Remember I told you this one? Meshuggah, correct. I'm going to teach you another Hebrew Yiddish word this morning. Can you say chutzpah? Chutzpah. Chutzpah means like from the gut. Chutzpah. Like, does it take guts to talk to a Jewish person about Jesus? It does. There's a lot of different barriers, and it takes chutzpah. So if I could train you to go on the streets of New York City and talk to Jewish people, even Orthodox, you could come back here to Bangor and talk to anybody. I think it's a great, great training, you know. We do Experience Israel, Outreach Israel. This is for younger people. So we take college kids and bring them to Israel for 6 weeks in the summer. That's pretty good. Experience Israel for non-college kids, and that's a 2-week experience. But some of you, maybe if you've done a tour in Israel, aren't wanting to go to the same sites again. So you get to do kind of a 2-week mission trips in Israel, which is pretty cool. This is another conference that we started called Mukhan. We take usually Gen Zs, millennials, and we do a conference usually somewhere in Eastern Europe where in World War II there was a lot of problems. So we've done the conferences in Poland, Berlin, Spain, talked about the Spanish Inquisition. So it's a way of us giving this younger generation the understanding of really what happened during World War II. And it's another very successful program. We do kids camps. My daughter is the one on the back of the other girl. And that's pretty cool. We love doing youth things because we have to give back to our kids. And my kids are part of it. In fact, in 2 weeks, we'll have, this is some of the older dates, but these are all the different camps that we have for our Messianic kids and those who go to Messianic synagogues. That's our website. Feinberg Center. Do you know that 80% of Jewish people have a bachelor's and 50% have a postgraduate degree? We're probably the most learned community in the world, which means that we have to be focused on, if in the Jewish world, you never ask somebody what they do for a living. You usually ask, where'd you get your master's or PhD? And so it's kind of very particular about the Jewish community. Where you went to school, doesn't matter what you got, because we realize most Jews are going to be lawyers and doctors, amen? But for the most part, we are a very learned missions organization, and we have to be very well trained in a lot of different areas, but having a postgraduate degree is very important in the Jewish world. We have the only Messianic Masters of Divinity program in the world that's accredited. We're part of Talbot Seminary, and we're a satellite. And you know where our satellite classroom takes place? Brooklyn, New York. Because if you go through an MDiv program, you got to be in the Jewish community, and Brooklyn is the best place to be. So you can get a Masters of Divinity. Now, here's the problem. The problem with this program is it's not for everybody. There's a lot of people that would love to get just the Jewish background of the scriptures and get a degree. But they can't come to the program because the program is designed to train the next generation of missionaries to the Jewish people. So you got to be focused on going into Jewish ministry. But a lot of people like yourself said, well, I don't want to get an MDiv, but I want to know more. And we heard you. So this September, we started a new program. I don't think I have it up here, but it's called the Chosen People Bible Institute. So we took our classes from the Feinberg and just put them online, and you can take those classes for a small fee. So if you're really interested, you like academia, don't want to get a degree, you can go to the Chosen People website and look up the Bible Institute. But the Feinberg Center is something that's tremendous. And because we know the cost of school is very expensive, we own the building where the center is, and all of the professors who have PhDs and DMins are all missionaries, so we don't have to pay them because they raise their support. And you know what tuition is to go to the school? $300 a class. No debt. Because we figured that if you come out of getting your bachelor's, students today have debt. We don't want to add to it. We want you to be able to go into the mission field and not add to the debt. It's one of the problems that a lot of Masters of Divinity seminaries are really hurting now, Scott. One, they're 3 years instead of 2 years, right? You're out, you come out, you're $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 in debt, and then you go to a church and they say, yeah, you can be a youth pastor half-time for $20,000 a year, and you go, well, how can I raise a family on that? You know, so seminaries are really adapting to the changing world. We're well ahead of the curve. $300 a class, isn't that nice? And this is all the things that you get to learn there. See, because you don't need the degree if you're not going into Jewish ministry. Rabbinic theology, Jewish integration, biblical preaching, but preaching from a Jewish perspective, rabbinic literature, hermeneutics from a Jewish standpoint. So these are kind of, this is a very important thing. We're online a lot. I shared my testimony, and we have a website called I Found Shalom. Over 100 testimonies of Jewish people who have come to faith that we try to generate leads to go there, especially Jewish people. Oh, there's me. We wanted to do a little bit more advocacy. A lot of you probably heard of a group called CUFI, Christians United for Israel. They raise a lot of money for Israel, but they don't do one thing. They don't do Jewish evangelism. Now, I don't have anything wrong with them raising money from Christians to give to Jewish causes. I'm okay with that. But they do what they do, we do what we do. We know, though, there's a lot of Christians that want to support Israel financially, but also want the Jewish people to hear the gospel. So we started an advocacy group called the Alliance for the Peace of Jerusalem. So it's kind of our version of kind of standing with Israel, especially we're doing a lot of work in that center right now with anti-Semitism. Isaiah53.com, which I mentioned we owned. That book we give out for free. We probably have given out in the last 10 years probably 500,000 books for free. 90% of them went to non-Jews. We found out that Christians like to get free books on Jewish websites, okay? But it's okay, because you know what? You know what we realized? Until afterwards, we were thinking about it, and I realized I don't have to teach you about Isaiah 53. You already know about it. I needed to just give you a resource. So I always figured there's 400,000 Christians out there with a free book about Isaiah 53, and I always pray that they would give it to a Jewish person when they're done reading it. They become my eyes and ears, which is pretty good. Sometimes we do big media ads on billboards, and that's the one going into the Lincoln Tunnel. That was pretty cool. About Messiah, that's a new discipleship website that we just, so if you've come to faith, you get to learn the Bible from a Jewish perspective. We do Messiah and the Passover, and we've created a website where you can do an interactive Passover Seder. We do digital campaigns. The Isaiah 53 has been translated into Chinese, Farsi, French, Spanish, Russian. Holiday campaigns. Lamech is a new Hebrew website that's kind of the same, where Jewish people can go and examine the scriptures and understand more about Jesus. That's a picture of an Orthodox Jew praying at the Wailing Wall. That's me for the first time when I went to Israel, praying at the Western Wall for the first time. And as a Jew, it was pretty cool. You know why? Because that's my homeland. You realize I'm a foreign missionary? My homeland is Israel. And this is what we do. And predominantly our two biggest centers are in Tel Aviv. And there's 3.5 million Jewish people in the greater Tel Aviv area. That's where a lot of secular Jews live. Okay? And this is our center now. And we've always wanted to move because we've outgrown it. And we saw a building a couple of years ago, a new condo unit, going up literally across the street from our center. And it had 2 spaces for commercial business on the bottom. So Domino's already had one of the spaces. We talked to the owners. Now, when you're a Messianic Jew in Israel, you don't usually get chances to buy a lot of property. Because generally speaking, Jewish people don't want to even rent, never mind sell to Jewish people. But in this case, it was a Persian Jew who really didn't know anything about being Messianic. So he was very happy to sell us 4,000 square feet in the building, and it cost a lot of money. So that building with renovations, because it was completely empty and now we have to renovate it, I think is going to cost us overall $6 million. But that was the investment that we had to make to be in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And we like to buy property. We don't like to rent, and I'll tell you why. Because when you buy, one, they can't kick you out. You imagine that there's going to be 200 Jewish families living in a condo unit that they don't know yet that we're going to be on the bottom. You think they're going to be happy? So if you rent, they can have a big outcry to the landlord, and then the landlord will just say, I'm kicking you out. If you own it, you own it, but you say to the Jewish community, we're not leaving. We're part of the community, and in Jewish ministry makes a big difference. So we buy. We don't rent. We only rent one space, my little office that's 300 square feet in Boston. Other than that, we own everything outright. We have no debt as a ministry. I love it. So when we get extra money into the ministry, you know what we do with it? We spend it. And we usually spend it on big things because we're a big thinking ministry. We want to be the major ministry to bring the gospel and train and equip Jewish people in knowing their Messiah. And so that's one of the things that Scott, you and I talked about. I think we're still about $1 million away to raise money for the renovations, which we're going through now. So that's a worthwhile project. It's a big project, but if you could be part of that, you have a say in how some of the most unreached people in the world in Tel Aviv are going to hear the gospel now. That's a very worthy project. This is our center in Jerusalem. It's a little different. We bought kind of an older mansion and restored it, and that's actually in the suburbs of Jerusalem, and that's been our center. Predominantly, we do a lot of ministry to the Russian-speaking Jews in Jerusalem, and that's some of the events that we have held there, and that's pretty good. And this is some of the trips that we do with the young kids. I'm going to end on this one because I just came back from New Zealand. When Israelis get out of the IDF, they take a year between serving in the army and going to school or going to work. And they backpack all over the world. And there's 3 main places they go. They go to India. There's a beach on the west side of India in a place called Goa. And before COVID, there was usually 50,000 Israelis slaying on the beach at any given time. So we have a coffee shop there called Mika Mocha. And we invite and we give out coffee for free and invite them to come and enjoy us. New Zealand, I just came back, and there's some pictures of Robin in New Zealand. Thousands and thousands of Israeli backpackers in New Zealand. We have 2 hostels, and we have an app that it's only you can get the app if you're Hebrew speaking. And you can stay in our hostels for free. Every place else charges. Ours, you can go for free. And again, we want to provide a safe space, but we do meals and we get a chance to talk to Israeli backpackers one-on-one. Who would have thought that you could reach Israelis up in the mountains of New Zealand? Isn't that cool? And the same thing with South America. You came back from Brazil, and I told you, there's a whole network of Israelis walking around Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Peru, and that ministry is a little different. We don't have a hostel. We actually bring teams and walk with them in the jungles. And as you're walking, we're talking to them. So our ministry is pretty vibrant. So, and then that's my whole ministry in Boston, but I just wanted to share with you my heart. So I hope that you have a pretty good viewpoint on what the Lord has allowed us to do since 1894. That's pretty impressive. I just stand on the shoulders of those who came before me and hope that we will continue to do what we're doing until the Lord comes back. So I know we just have a couple of minutes, but does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? Nobody has a question? Nobody wants to stump me about the Bible?
I heard a female rabbi, she said, it's a nice thing that we don't have to sacrifice animals anymore. And the first thing that comes to my mind was, how do you get remission of sin if there's no blood?
So the way that it was presented to me growing up is Jewish people think the sacrificial system is a very archaic system. That it was good 2,000 years ago, but when the temple was destroyed, the way that it's presented to the Jewish people in Hebrew school is that was a system that God had a long time ago, but we don't need it now. You know, we now can pray and do good works because there is no sacrificial system. God made it easier for us. That was a way a long time ago. We have a different system. So Judaism is a works-based system. Growing up, I was told God has a scale, and you try to do more good than bad. And let's be honest, that's not a Jewish system. That's a worldwide system that goes against the gospel, you know? But that's generally speaking most Jew, hey, I hope I'm good enough. But there's always this little sidebar, you know why? Because if you're Jewish, you think you have kind of like the wild card in your pocket. You know, I'm Jewish, so we're in. But I better hedge my bets so I'll still do good work. Alrighty, I think we need to wrap things up because we have a service to come to. And I want to thank you. Let me just send in a word of prayer, and then I'll hand it back over to Pastor Scott. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father and King, I want to thank you so much for just the ministry of Chosen People Ministries. Started out as the American Board of Mission to the Jews, and now, Lord, we want to just thank you for allowing us to be able to just share the gospel, not just with Jewish people, but as we reach Jewish people all over the world, we meet many, many Gentiles as well. Lord, this morning I pray for this Tel Aviv Center. It's going to be a game changer in Jewish ministry. We're going to do so much ministry there. We're going to plant a congregation. We're going to do concerts. We're going to have a coffee shop so that the average Israeli can just come off the street, grab a free cup of coffee, and be able to share maybe some scriptures with them. So I ask that you would continue to increase our staff in Israel. You would give them a passion. There's going to be a lot of ministry, especially after the war, because there's going to be a lot of soldiers that are going to need ministry afterwards too, Lord. So, Father, we just thank you for all those that have supported our ministry all these years. And we thank you for those that will continue to support. And I want to thank you for Herman Baptist Church, Lord, for being a church that does support Jewish ministry. And we thank you for their support up in Canada, here in the U.S., and Lord willing, if they could be part of what we're doing in Israel, that would be fantastic. And we thank you for that. In the name of Jesus, amen.